Hello, my name is Sina Maitach and this is a pre-recorded presentation for the 2002 meeting of the Society for Mathematical Psychology. To begin, I would like to briefly talk about the retrieving effectively from memory model, or for short, REM model. The REM model explains the strength-based mirror effect observed in item recognition via differentiation. In other words, the model assumes that as we study something more and more, we would be more likely to recognize what we have studied. And similarly, as we study something additionally, we would also be more likely to know what we never studied. So the model assumes that the repetition of studied items increases the hit rates and decreases the false alarm rates via differentiation. In addition, in the model, source information is represented the same as item information. So following this assumption, we assume that if we study something repeatedly in the same source, we would be more likely to recognize that source and less likely to falsely recognize the source if the item is presented in a new or wrong source. Furthermore, we added this process to the model specifically after item recognition to be able to make a source recognition decision on whether the item is presented in a correct or new source. We would compare the presented source with the source of the best matching item trace, and we would make the decision based on this comparison. Similarly, if item has been studied in multiple sources, in this case, we would be comparing the presented source with all the sources item has been studied in and making the decision based on these comparisons. Here is the first experiment, and if I tell you briefly the design of the experiment, in this experiment, participants studied items repeatedly, either in one source, or three different sources, or two different sources. And if they studied items in two different sources, that means that items were presented two times in the one source and once in another source. And at test, participants are tested with the sources. Either items are repeated two times or only once. And in this figure, you see the average hit rates and the average false alarm rates across participants for each condition, and the predictions of the REM model for hit rates and again for false alarm rates for each condition. And as you can see, there's a strong pattern of strength-based mirror effect in source memory, and the model fits the data very well. So in these experiments, this time participants studied some items repeatedly in one source and some other items in three different sources. But at test, they are tested with either strong sources or weak sources. And the only difference between experiment 2 and experiment 3 is that in experiment 3, we inform participants about the nature of the test list. So again, here you see the hit rates, the false alarm rates from the original data, and the predictions of the REM model for both experiments. And as you can see, the model fits the data very well, maybe except the false alarm rates observed in the single source repetition condition. In conclusion, according to the REM model, source is represented the same as the information itself in memory. And if this is the case, the REM model is able to explain the strength-based mirror effect in source recognition via differentiation. Thank you for listening.